your last name? What? Your first name? Lee. And how old is your mother? She's 60.
A son made this harrowing call to police after discovering his mother had been hammered to death.
I can't believe someone could do that to another human.
But in a chilling twist, police uncovered the unthinkable. The killer was her own son, who took her life for just $100. A shocking act that revealed the true cruelty behind the crime.
He was buying dope. He kept coming back from his mother's house getting dope. Coming back with money, getting dope.
How much?
100.
100. I don't know how many times it is, but I ain't down.
Responding to a harrowing 911 call on April 7, 2013 in Clarksville, Tennessee, police arrived at the crime scene inside the home, one that left them stunned.
When I arrived at the house, I went in to see if there was anything I could do to assist Lee Watts' mother. There was no apparent damage to the door like there had been any forced entry. Blood all over the bed.
The victim was identified as Ethel Adamson. The scene was so disturbing, it rattled even the most experienced officers.
I saw her laying in the bed. She was gurgling. A lot of people call that the death rattle. If you hear the death rattle, it's going to be pretty bad. She had a lot of damage to her head that you could see.
The scene was horrific, but there was one glimmer of hope. Ethel Adamson was still alive. She was rushed to the hospital, clinging to life. Her son, Lee Watts, was present at the scene, and police quickly took him in for questioning.
I kind of want to find out just a little background about Mom a little bit. Does she date or any just friends in general that come over often? Explain to me, like, what's your living situation? You say you don't live there necessarily? Stay with Mom 3 nights a week. And stay with Victoria 4 nights a week. This last night happened to be the night that I should have stayed home.
During Lee's interview, police learned about his girlfriend, Victoria Hodges, also known as Vickie. She'd asked him to make the 911 call. Even more surprisingly, Vickie was a friend of Ethel's. With that revelation, the cops simultaneously conducted an interrogation with Vickie.
So you and Lee, you were saying a boyfriend, girl?
Yeah, we've been dating since, he says July, I say August. So, and yes, I know about his record, and I know he's been in prison, and I know all that. And I also just think everybody deserves a chance.
With a clear understanding of Lee's character, police turned their focus to the crucial question, where was he the night of the crime?
Just prior to you leaving, you say you left at 12 p.m. How long had you been there yesterday? I was with her up until 12 last night. That's when I went to the warehouse.
Lee told us that prior to the morning when he found Ethel, he had been out scrapping metal at the old Frosty Moore building all night and had fallen asleep inside the building before waking up and coming home that morning.
Lee's alibi appeared to check out, as his girlfriend Vickie confirmed the same details.
He's working really hard. He is scrapping. He does have several contracts to do work, and he's been doing really good.
But what Vickie revealed next shifted the investigation and made the police consider that it might hold the key to the motive behind the crime.
I know that Mama got $6,500. I know she called me and told me. Now, she wanted to keep money around the house, and she doesn't trust anybody. And I told her to go put that in the bank.
When police questioned Lee about the newfound money, he too seemed worried for his mother.
Dude told me she got some like VA, but she never told me how much because I told her it's not my business, Mom. It's your money. I don't want to know anything about it. And I didn't. She's been out every day this week, or every day since she's gotten the car, buying things. So she bought a car. Went to Walmart, buying all her groceries. They're having groceries. In the neighborhood we're in, it's a bad neighborhood. And she's going out every day buying new things.
Believing that money might be the motive, police returned to the house to search for it. What they found, however, was far more chilling than they could have imagined.
We looked in all of the places that Vickie said the money may be. There was no money in the house to be found, but on the living room floor in Ms. Adamson's house, there was a claw hammer.
The hammer was later identified as the weapon used to strike Ethel. With this key piece of evidence, investigators returned to question Lee once more.
So you worked at the warehouse for how long? Last one. 3-4 hours. This is there's a bad down, and you guys right down on the mat and sleep. And you woke up around what time? Around 7:30, around that came home was around 8:45, 9 o'clock. As I went to put the key in the doorknob, it just pushed right open. That's when I stepped in. I heard Mama gargling and stuff like this. I immediately went in there. That's when I found her. First thing I done was call baby girl. She's a retired RN. Yeah, then I called 911.
But something about his statement didn't sit right with the cops.
The fact that he first called his girlfriend, Vickie Hodges, prior to calling 911, I thought it was very odd, not normal thing. His explanation was that she was a nurse and that he thought she could give good advice.
Further questioning revealed that Vickie was the last person Lee called before heading to his mother's house. Detectives began to see a troubling pattern, and they asked to check his phone.
Can I grab your phone and you guys take a look at it together? You go with that?
Inside his phone, the cops found something rather unusual.
Your call starts at 9 o'clock. What happened on the calls prior to that?
Prior to Vickie's call that morning at 9 o'clock, all call history was non-existent. And the 911 call was singled out and deleted. I immediately thought it was weird. If that was deleted, what else could have been deleted? Was he purposely hiding something?
Where's all the rest of the calls from last night? I'm like, I was still know. Last night. I haven't seen you clean the hall now. Okay, do you recall recently this morning? No, sir, I don't. I called 911 from that phone. Okay. Well, I'm not doubting. I'm just curious what happened to the call up. No.
Now, the cops suspected Lee was hiding something, but they had an advantage. Both he and his girlfriend, Vickie, were being interrogated at the same time, and that would soon work to their favor.
One of the advantages of having interviews going on simultaneously is when one of the investigators in one of the interviews finds out a key piece of information, they're able to stop and relay that information to the other investigator, and that may be a piece that they can use to really break the case.
The cops wasted no time and asked Vickie about the call log.
He called 911, but then he removed the call from his phone to 911 at the call log.
It is a little odd, but he may have been shaking. I don't know.
Did he sound?
He was scared to death. That phone, he was high pitched for him. Now, I have to tell you, y'all know Lee's record. I know Lee's record. He ain't held anything from me. He would never. Okay? Let me state that. From the depth of my soul, I know him, if anybody does. And you can take that to the bank.
Back in the interrogation room, the cops decided to shatter Lee's facade, taking a much more confrontational approach.
I just thought of when you and I will come in here, we'll be able to discuss details and everything will make perfect sense. You see what I'm saying? It's just, now that I'm in here, it's slightly confusing, especially when it comes to the phone. You see where I'm coming from?
I knew that he was leaving out information. It was at this point that I decided to change my strategy and actually confront him with the inconsistencies that did not make any sense.
Your mother was already in bed by the time you left, correct? Yeah. You locked the doors and deadbolts, everything. Walked to the warehouse. Is there anybody that knew that you were going to the warehouse? Yeah, no. Our girlfriend knew I was going back to the warehouse. Why at midnight? That's when I get most of my work done. Why? It's just easier and cooler in there to work. Did you work with anybody last night? No, sir. I work alone.
Vickie stood by Lee, defending him every step of the way.
Normally, Lee goes to the warehouse. Sometimes he'll leave at 11. Sometimes he'll leave at midnight.
How does he usually get home, though?
He walks.
The police tried to extract every detail, but nothing seemed to shake them. Their cohesive harmony only made them appear more suspicious.
What were you wearing when you went back to the warehouse? I was wearing these black slacks and that purple shirt. Were you wearing the same shoes? Why still dressed up at 12 o'clock at night, scrapping metals? I think I was going to go to church this morning.
What does he normally wear when he works?
What he has on, except for his dress pants. He had his dress pants on because he was going to church, and his purple shirt's probably still on the porch. He had already changed, probably at the warehouse.
Lee and Vickie were determined, but so were the cops.
How long did you buy the shoe? He forgave $20 for it. But you worked at them last night? You walked around in them. What does that mean, you walked around? Just picking stuff up, like $3 but not any hard labor. Look at him. Pretty thick stuff.
At this moment, detectives noticed something shocking. It made them believe that something far darker was right in front of them, yet somehow still slipping through their fingers.
It did stand out to me that he was wearing these nice clothes, these nice shoes, and there were no scuff marks, no dust, no dirt. At this point, I decided to just be quiet and create a moment of silence and give him an opportunity to feel that silence with anything he might want to say.
Lee could tell the detectives' doubts were growing, so he tried to ease their concerns.
Can I say something that takes a moment, detective? Please. I respect you doing your job. And I just got this funny feeling that, I don't know. You got the feeling like I'm accusing you? Yeah. I love my mother with all my heart. I would never lay a hand on her this way. I do not doubt it. Do not doubt it at all.
In this early stage, we had to consider just about anybody a suspect. But in the back of my mind, it stuck out to me like he felt a little bit guilty.
The cops were now waiting for Ethel to recover in the hospital, confident she would reveal who was behind the attack. While they waited, the detectives decided to check the place where Lee claimed he was working.
When we arrived, Detective Ewan and I walked with Lee to the front of the building. It's an abandoned building that had been boarded up, and there was a piece of plywood that was covering a hole in the wall. Lee claimed that that was his entrance. He crawled through the hole. He came to the front door, and as soon as he opened it, I could see that his pants were immediately dirty and dusty, and his shoes were scuffed. Immediately, I knew there was no way he could have been wearing those exact clothes to scrap metal in that building. It was at this point that he was the number one suspect.
Lee had quickly moved to the top of the suspect list, but as suspicious as it looked, suspicion alone doesn't hold up in court. No direct evidence tied him to what happened inside that house. So, despite the growing doubts around him, detectives had no choice. They let him walk. But soon, the case took a sharp, irreversible turn.
On April the 9th, we learned that Ethel Adamson had passed away in the hospital. I personally was kind of heartbroken. This mother suffered the way she did and couldn't speak for herself. I felt a sense of responsibility to find out who did this to Miss Adamson. And this immediately changed the investigation from an aggravated assault to a homicide.
Ethel Adamson, who had been in critical condition since the day of the attack, was gone. She passed away at Vanderbilt University Medical Center on August 7th, 2013, without ever regaining consciousness. With her death, everything changed.
I didn't know what to do. It was like a shot in the heart. I took it pretty hard, for sure.
With Ethel's death, the case was no longer classified as an assault. It was now a homicide. With her death, the course of the investigation changed. Even though Lee was free to go, the suspicion didn't fade. The police stayed focused, digging deeper, determined to find evidence to turn the case around.
Part of most investigations, if there are phone records that can be used to assist in the investigation, we subpoena those records. On April 11th, we received the results from the subpoena of Lee Watts' phone activity and phone records. We found that there was a lot of activity on the phone and the phone's location that traveled a larger distance than just the area that Lee claimed to have been at all night.
Lee's phone records had arrived, and with them, a new lead. The data showed much more than anyone had anticipated. The phone's location painted a different picture of Lee's movements that night, contradicting his initial story. But there was one detail that stood out above the rest.
This was a critical point in the investigation because we knew beyond a shadow of doubt he was lying to us. There was one number that stood out to us on the records because it was called multiple times that evening. Ended up being Jessie Buckley. So I called the number, and he subsequently agrees to come in and speak with us.
Jessie Buckley's name stood out as a critical lead. His repeated contact with Lee that evening couldn't be ignored. The phone records pointed to a link between them, and the cops felt Jessie might know something about what had happened that night. It was time to question him.
I heard of him when I met him one night.
Jessie quickly explained to us that he was approached by Lee, and that Lee was looking to buy drugs to party that evening.
How much money do you have on it? Do you remember?
Oh my goodness. He kept leaving, going to get money. Kept leaving, going to get money. Well, he told me he'd text me once he get the money.
Detectives discovered that Lee went by the street name Frog, adding a new layer to his character. Jessie revealed that Lee had been looking to buy drugs that evening, bouncing between various locations, contradicting the story he'd originally told. What deepened the suspicion was the final mismatch. If all the contracts he had were just for scrap collection, there was no way he could have come into that kind of money. Ethel, on the other hand, had it. This discovery led the investigators to wonder, did Lee know about it? Could that money have something to do with what happened? When they brought it up to him, he looked surprised. He said he didn't know anything about it, but the cops weren't so sure.
I know where you're going with this. I don't know. I can't confirm none of that. All I know is that after he kept going and coming and going, I left the house. Now I know he's supposed to went to A&W Hotel. After that, this girl ain't sick. She said she was gonna call you.
He went to the hotel at 6.
You know sick?
Yes.
During Jessie's interrogation, he dropped another name, Six, who also went by Satara. He claimed she had been involved that night, or at least knew more than what he knew. Acting on that lead, investigators located her quickly and brought her in for questioning. At this point, the case was no longer about what Lee had done. It was about who else had been part of it and how deep this went.
This last Saturday night, Sunday morning, there was a dude you were with. You remember his name? A white dude? Rob.
Yeah. That whole night. Finna tell you everything.
Okay.
He was buying dope. He kept coming back from his mother's house getting dope. Coming back with money, getting dope.
How much?
100.
What was he wearing that night?
He had a t-shirt with some J's on.
Six's statement added a disturbing piece to the puzzle. Lee had been coming back and forth from his mother's house throughout the night, each time with a little more money in hand, just enough to get his next fix. The amount she mentioned wasn't in the thousands. It was just a few hundred, and that's what unsettled the detectives the most. Not just that he might have taken money from his mother, but that someone could take a life over it.
Yeah.
Always the same thing from the first time you saw him to the end?
No. Mm-mm.
What do you mean?
Different shirts every time he came back.
Detectives now had a detail they couldn't ignore. Lee had changed his clothes that night. They believed it wasn't random. If there were bloodstains, it could mean only one thing. And if that was true, it pointed to something far more serious than just drug use or theft.
We checked in at it was 4 or 5 in the morning.
4 or 5, okay.
And then after that, he said, I'll be right back. It was like 8:30. I'm going to my mom's house to get some more money. That's what he said.
Did he ever come back?
With both Jessie and Six backing up key parts of the story, the pieces were starting to fall into place. The detectives learned from Six that Lee had spent the night at the A&W Motel. That tip was quickly verified. Motel records confirmed that a room had been rented under his name for the same night Ethel was attacked. With the evidence piling up, the detectives brought in Lee's girlfriend again. When the cops showed her the evidence, she didn't seem shocked, just quiet. It made them wonder if she already knew. Maybe she was covering for him. After all, she was his girlfriend.
He asked me point blank if I thought he was guilty.
Would you tell him?
No, because I don't.
I want you to tell me where in your heart, based on what he's told you, what you feel or whatever, Lee spent Saturday night before coming home and finding his mother Sunday morning.
At the warehouse. I wouldn't believe him any other way.
Okay.
At this point, the detectives were still talking to Vickie, trying to understand her perspective. They hadn't yet shown her the evidence, but it was clear that they were preparing to. The goal was clear: to make her reconsider her loyalty to Lee and potentially uncover new details that could shift the course of the investigation. With the truth now on the table, it was becoming evident that this conversation could lead to crucial revelations that would finally bring clarity to the case.
You told us that Saturday that if we figured like we felt like we knew it hurt, you would
So give me 1 ounce of proof and I'll help you.
All right.
You understand?
But
son, you better have it.
okay, now I want you to listen to me. I'm going to tell you that Saturday night, Lee was in the projects, using drugs and tricking with prostitutes.
And you know that beyond a shadow of a doubt.
I'm going to go bring you Lee's phone records.
Okay.
All right.
I want you to do that.
Hang on a second.
Because then I may have to go home and be sick.
Okay, you hang on a second.
Okay. Lord, it just can't be. I'm sorry, Father. It just can't be. He would not do this. I can't, Lord, Father. I can't. I can't believe this. Lord Jesus, Father in heaven, this just cannot be.
Vickie sat quietly, listening as the detectives continued their questioning. They hadn't shown her any concrete evidence yet, but the information they had provided was starting to make her doubt Lee's innocence. She remained silent, processing what had been said, uncertain about what to believe.
What I want to point out to you is one particular phone number.
I don't know that now.
No, you don't. Belongs to a guy named Jessie Buckley.
I don't know.
You don't know. You're right. Lee gives him $200. They score Lee $200.
I have that much.
Follow with me.
I'm on it.
They score Lee $200 worth of dope. And Lee has smoked all the dope at his house. So they're working on getting some more dope, and Lee goes and gets some more money. Lee provides more money, and they smoke more dope. A girl named Six. You know who Six is?
No, never heard of that.
Eventually, Lee and Six leave and go to the A&W Motel and get a room.
Vickie listened as the details were laid out before her. She could see the truth in the phone records and the events of that night. The more she heard, the clearer it became. The man she had supported was involved in something far more serious than she'd realized. After seeing the sheer amount of evidence the detectives had against Lee, Vickie was left shaken.
So what you're telling me is is, you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that a man I've led around my child in my home. I'm gonna let you draw my best friend. I'm not done. I'm gonna let you draw your conclusion.
The detectives no longer had to say anything to convince her. The evidence had done its job, and Vickie's belief in Lee, which had been so strong, was about to collapse.
I think he's crying in my home. I think he's been in my heart. I understand that, Vickie. He killed my best friend. Okay, I can't handle it anymore today. I'm sorry, I cannot.
All right, just hold tight for me for just a second, okay?
As the horror of what had unfolded began to set in, Vickie began to panic.
I will be sick in just a few minutes.
Okay, you want the bathroom?
No, I didn't want to.
Vickie, tell me what you need.
I want my friend back.
Seeing the state she was in, the detective did his best to offer some words of comfort and also explain to her what would happen next.
We're going to resolve this tonight, I feel like. But if for some reason we don't, this is what I want to tell you. And I know it hasn't been intentional, but you have provided protection for Lee.
I didn't mean.
I know that you did because you believed in him. But you have to understand what I'm saying. You're the only one. This is where we are.
On hearing what the detective had to say, Vickie seemed to calm down a little. She agreed with what he'd said and had made her decision.
You've given me the ounce I asked for. I'm going home now, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing her genuine distraught reaction to learning the truth about Lee, the detective could only reach one conclusion.
I felt bad for Vickie and her son Jameson because they had both become so close to Lee and trusted fully in him. I never really had a doubt about Vickie, but at the conclusion of this interview, it was 100% clear in my mind that she had no knowledge before or after about what Lee Watts had done to his mother, Ethel.
Now it was time to get justice for Ethel once and for all and hold her killer, her own son, accountable. Although the investigators had enough evidence to arrest Lee right away, they still hoped for a confession, and so they sat down with him for an interview once more.
You swear 100% hand to God this is true? You swear?
Initially, it seemed like they were not going to be able to get anything. Lee seemed intent to stick with his made-up story once again.
Give me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, because we are investigating the murder of your mother.
I love my mother with all my heart. I feel like that it's the same process going over and over. It's running me dry.
Seeing this, the detective decided to try and adopt a more confrontational strategy in an attempt to get him to open up more and admit the truth.
My right hand in the Bible of God, I am telling you the truth.
If you can sit here and look me in the eye and say, my right hand on the Bible of God, I'm telling you the truth, you're not the kind of person who I thought you would be. I thought that you had some shreds of dignity left. I thought you felt remorse and guilt for what happened to your mother. You asked it. You asked for yourself. It's my mother's killer. And I can tell you who your mother's killer was.
It's not me, sir. I didn't do anything. I didn't kill my mother. I love my mother.
The detective had made a risky move, directly accusing Lee of the murder. It could make Lee shut down completely, but the detective hoped it would push him to actually admit to himself that he had committed this heinous act, but Lee would not budge.
What I told you earlier, you still when you took me notes is the truth.
This is such a bullshit. Lee, it's ridiculous. It's insulting is what it is. It's a hotline.
Seeing his closed-off attitude, the detective decided to ramp up the pressure and began to reveal more and more of the evidence they had on him.
You think I don't know where you went? What times you went there? You had this in your pocket. You are lying, Lee.
I'm trying to bury my mother in a respectful way. I'm being accused of something I haven't done.
But despite this aggressive strategy, Lee continued to deny everything. So once again, the detective changed strategies. This time he decided to try and use minimizing words and frame Lee's intent differently. This strategy is often used when officers believe the suspect is feeling guilty and therefore having difficulty admitting to their crime.
I believe you love your mother, Lee. I see it all. Some of the things that I think about when I think about a man like you, dealing with the stress that you deal with, having the past that you've had. So maybe you didn't even mean to kill her. Maybe you just thought you were knocking her out. Like you see on the TV 100 times. Hit someone in the back of the head, boom, they're passed out. So maybe that was your intent. But if that's what it is, you need to tell me that. Because if it's not what it is, it looks a whole lot worse.
All I can sit here and say, sir, I love my mother from the bottom of my heart. I did not calculate anything. I didn't want her money. I was stupid.
It's lovely she gave it to me, and I gave it to her. Okay, if you didn't calculate harming her, how did it come to pass? How did what come to pass? What did you hit her with? I didn't hit her with anything. I didn't do this.
But even after this change of tactics, Lee would still continue to deny everything. So yet again, the detective decided to pivot. Now he would try to appeal to the good in Lee, holding him to a higher standard to see if he would step up and meet it.
We all make mistakes. We all have little points in our life. But what determines the type of man we are is how we proceed from this point on now. These conversations are very long because I know what happened tonight. I think you can tell me what you have on your mind. We can't wait to hear that until after you bury your mother. I'm doing this for my mother. I'm doing this for your mother. You're detaining the wrong one, sir. Who should I be detaining? I don't know what I'm going to help.
This tactic seemed to work better than the others, with Lee slipping up and admitting he knew what happened that night. Sensing an opportunity, the detective again began to pressure him to reveal the truth.
I didn't kill the mother, okay? Yes, I smoked a little dope that night. But I'm not the job to kill my mother.
Lee revealed another little nugget, admitting to his drug use on the night of the murder, something he had wholly denied up until this point. The cracks were beginning to appear.
I got back to the house, gave her a couple of drinks. Mom was asleep. I went around to the southern bed and reached up on her pillow and I got all this morning. I never hit my mother in the head. And please believe me, I say, but never hurt my mother this way. And I believe a lot of what you're telling me. I think it takes a lot of personal courage to talk about the things you're talking about. Do you have my respect? But you still believe it. You still believe it. I don't believe that you meant to hurt your mother. I told you the truth. Yes, you did. There's just one piece of this.
Lee admitted to stealing the money as well, but it appeared like he'd not be able to bring himself to a full confession. The one piece the detective desperately needed refused to reveal itself.
You didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do it. Lee, you can tell yourself that all you want. It doesn't change the fact.
Even though Lee had not admitted to anything, his body language told a different story. He was worn out and visibly defeated.
Can I smoke a cigarette? Please? We can go ahead and smoke a cigarette, but I'm going to have you in handcuffs when we go out there.
But what the detective could never have expected was what would happen when Lee was outside smoking with the officer who'd been assigned to keep an eye on him.
During the smoke break, Lee crouches down and leans up against the door. So I just kind of knelt down beside him. He'd been sitting for 3 hours speaking with Detective Ewing. And now he's talking to a different voice. And he just broke. He admits to me at that point that I hurt my mama. He had said the one thing that he never wanted to say.
But there was one problem. This confession had occurred outside, with no recording and only one witness. This wouldn't be admissible in court. Therefore, the detective would sit down with Lee once more and attempt to coax the truth from him.
I admire your courage and your bravery and your self-sacrifice for being able to tell the truth, and I know it hurt. But we need to finish up and then be able to move on.
Almost immediately, Lee confessed to hurting his mother, which was not the full truth, but was certainly far more than he'd been willing to admit to prior. Sensing he was now ready to open up, the detective now gently pushed him for more crucial details.
What do you think you heard that time? No. So you didn't plan it out or anything? No, I didn't plan it. You just did. How did you hear it? I don't know how many times I did, but I ain't gonna.
As he recounted the crime and confirmed everything the detectives had gathered from the evidence, Lee's fate was sealed. But then he continued to go into his supposed reasons behind the crime.
I just feel somebody love me. A hug. This man. All I wanted to hear was the 3 words. I never heard.
But the detectives weren't buying what he was saying, especially given what they already knew.
It was offensive to me personally that he would try and make himself somewhat of a victim, because in all the time that I've known Lee Watts, wherever he fell down in life, Ethel was always the one to pick him up and at a minimum, allow him back in her house and put a roof over his head and food in his mouth.
The interview came to an end, and Lee Watts was arrested and officially charged with the murder of Ethel Adamson, his own mother. It would take 2.5 years, but the case would eventually reach its conclusion when it went to trial. Before that, however, the defense faced a huge challenge.
The DNA analysis and the fingerprint analysis on the hammer revealed there was Mrs. Adamson's blood, DNA, on the hammer, but there were no prints linking it to Mr. Lee Watts, her son.
With no fingerprints of Lee's on the hammer, his recorded confession was crucial to the prosecution's case, and when it was shown to the jury, the reaction was clear.
When the jury watched the confession of Lee Watts, you could tell by the body language of almost the entire jury, it was over. The confession of Lee Watts was definitely the keystone to this case. It made this case.
After this, it didn't take long for the jury to reach a verdict. Lee Watts was found guilty of first-degree felony murder and aggravated robbery. He was sentenced to life with 25 years to be served consecutively. Lee is eligible for parole in 2077, but he'll most likely not see that year, making this effectively a life sentence. We hope that those who loved Ethel find some peace and comfort knowing that justice has been served.